03:48 hours, 29 September 2024, Eastern Ukraine front line. A Russian attack helicopter worth $18 million hovers 80 meters above the tree line. Twin turboshaft engines generate 4,400 horsepower. Armor plating rated against 12.7 millimeter rounds. Sensors that can detect a human heat signature at 10 kilometers. Approaching from below, a modified commercial drone worth less than $2,000. The math shouldn't work. The helicopter's defensive systems cost more than 1,000 drones. Its 30mm cannon can fire 300 rounds per minute. Its pilots trained for 500 hours minimum. Yet in 12 seconds, this flying fortress will become scrap metal. How did Ukrainian forces turn hobby equipment into a weapon that's destroying Russia's most advanced combat aircraft? The destroyed helicopter was a Mi-8, NATO designation Havoc. Not some Cold War relic, but a modern gunship designed specifically to survive in contested airspace. Let's establish what approximately $18 million bought: dual redundant flight controls. If one system fails, the backup engages instantly. Titanium reinforced cockpit certified to withstand 20mm cannon impacts. Infrared suppression systems that reduce heat signature by 60%. Electronic countermeasures that can jam radar-guided missiles. The weapons package included a 30mm Shipenoff, 2 A-42 autocannon with 250 rounds, guided anti-tank missiles with 6-kilometer range, unguided rocket pods carrying 80mm S-8 rockets, all controlled through a helmet-mounted display that lets pilots engage targets just by looking at them. This wasn't random luck. The helicopter was hunting. Its mission: suppress Ukrainian positions that had been harassing Russian supply convoys for weeks. Intelligence suggested standard procedure: arrive fast, unleash firepower, exit before anti-aircraft systems could respond. But Ukrainian forces had stopped playing by those rules. The weapon that killed this helicopter started as a first-person view racing drone, the kind hobbyists fly through obstacle courses wearing video goggles. Basic specifications: 5-inch propellers spinning at 30,000 RPM. Top speed around 140 kilometers per hour. Flight time approximately 7 minutes. Payload capacity 500 grams. Ukrainian engineers modified these toys into weapons through brutal simplicity. Remove the GoPro mount. Add a shaped charge warhead, usually an RPG-7 grenade or modified 40mm munition. Replace the racing firmware with military encrypted controls. Total modification time: 2 hours. Total cost, including warhead, $1,800. The pilot operating this drone sat 4 kilometers away in a concealed bunker. His equipment: video goggles showing the drone's perspective, a standard radio controller, and a laptop displaying tactical maps. He'd trained for 3 weeks, not years like the helicopter crew. At 03:48 hours, thermal spotters detected the helicopter's engine heat. The drone launched from a hidden position among destroyed farm equipment. Flying at treetop level, using terrain masking, it approached from the helicopter's 6 o'clock low, the blind spot where neither pilot could see without banking the aircraft. The helicopter's radar warning receiver never activated. These drones emit no radar signature. The infrared countermeasures found nothing to jam. The drone used manual control, not heat-seeking guidance. The engine noise was masked by the helicopter's own rotor wash. Impact occurred at the tail rotor assembly. The shaped charge detonated on contact, sending a jet of molten copper through the gearbox. Without tail rotor authority, the helicopter entered an uncontrollable spin. Both pilots ejected, but at approximately 80 meters altitude. Their parachutes had insufficient time to deploy. This kill wasn't isolated. Ukrainian drone units were regularly targeting and destroying Russian helicopters as FPV technology became more precise and widespread. The economics were devastating. Russia spending $18 million per helicopter, Ukraine spending $2,000 per drone. Even accounting for failed attempts, the cost ratio exceeded 1,000 to 1. Russian forces recognized the threat. Their first adaptation, motorcycle assault units. The logic seemed sound. Armored vehicles were drone magnets, slow, loud, heat-generating targets that drones could track for kilometers. Motorcycles offered speed, maneuverability, and minimal thermal signature. A soldier on a motorcycle could cover 500 meters in 30 seconds, faster than most drones could react. So Russia adapted. Dozens of Chinese-made 250 cubic centimeter motorcycles, each capable of 120 kilometers per hour, were supplied to assault units. Riders wore standard body armor and carried AK-12 rifles. The idea was simple: hit fast, stay low, and move quicker than drones could aim. One of the first motorcycle assaults occurred near Avdiivka. 40 riders attacked Ukrainian positions at dawn. They covered 300 meters in 20 seconds. Then, the mines detonated. Ukrainian forces had anticipated this tactic. They'd laid TM-62 anti-tank mines at 50-meter intervals. Overkill for motorcycles, but ensuring any vehicle triggered detonation. The first wave lost 12 riders instantly. The survivors encountered pre-positioned machine gun nests with interlocking fields of fire. But the real killer was still drones. Ukrainian operators had learned to lead targets like duck hunters. They'd pre-positioned drones along likely attack routes. When motorcycles appeared, drones were already airborne, already accelerating to intercept. The motorcycle units suffered catastrophic losses. In just 3 weeks, casualty rates reached nearly 60 to 70%. Videos circulated showing abandoned bikes strewn across fields. Riders either killed outright or forced to flee on foot. What began as tactical innovation devolved into a costly failure. The tactical failures were measurable: helicopters destroyed, assaults repelled, and morale collapsing. But the most revealing evidence didn't come from the battlefield reports. It came from the soldiers themselves. Several videos began circulating on Russian social media channels, recorded by soldiers fighting in Ukraine. One clip showed 2 brothers, both wounded, speaking from the front line. They condemned the war and complained about the conditions in their unit. One of them said most of their fellow soldiers were either injured or had deserted, and that their whereabouts were unknown. Despite their wounds and exhaustion, their commander had ordered them to take part in another assault. Another video appeared days later. It showed a Russian soldier standing among the bodies of his fallen comrades. He identified himself as Alexei Smirnov and said he was the only survivor from a unit of 20 men. In the video, Smirnov urged Russians not to join the war, warning that they would be killed just like his fellow soldiers, lying around him. He said their commanders had abandoned them and only cared about themselves, treating regular troops as cannon fodder. His message was simple but devastating. A direct appeal to those still in Russia, telling them to think of their families and children before going to Ukraine. The human testimonies revealed a deeper crisis: systemic equipment failure. Russian logistics, strained since 2022, had collapsed in critical areas by 2025. Body armor was the most visible shortage. New recruits received steel plates from the 1980s, heavy, inflexible, and useless against modern ammunition. Some units had no plates at all, just empty carrier vests for appearance. Soldiers stuffed them with cardboard or phone books. Psychological comfort against inevitable death. Communications equipment was worse. Secure radios that should have been standard issue existed only at company level. 1 per 100 men. Squad leaders used Chinese-manufactured walkie-talkies with 2-kilometer range. These operated on known frequencies that Ukrainian electronic warfare units jammed continuously. Medical supplies had vanished entirely in some sectors. Individual first aid kits should contain tourniquets, pressure bandages, and morphine. Reality: most soldiers carried torn bed sheets as bandages and expired Soviet-era painkillers. The wounded had better chances of surrendering to Ukrainians than waiting for Russian medical evacuation. but ammunition was running dangerously low. Russian tactics relied on overwhelming artillery fire, thousands of shells before any infantry advanced. Instead, some units were receiving barely 10 rounds a day for the entire battalion. Infantry ammunition wasn't much better. Standard combat load should be 300 rounds per soldier. Most carried 120. Some had 60. Machine gunners who should have 1,000 rounds made do with 200. When contact began, Russian forces could sustain fire for only a few minutes. The testimonies revealed another pattern: command breakdown. Officers who should have been leading from the front were nowhere near combat. Battalion commanders operated from bunkers 15 kilometers behind the lines. Company commanders rarely left fortified positions. Platoon leaders, if they existed, were often mobilized civilians with 2 weeks of training. One captured document, authenticated by intelligence analysts, showed the reality. A battalion of approximately 500 men had 3 professional officers. Everyone else was mobilized reserves, or contract soldiers with minimal training. The battalion commander hadn't visited forward positions in 6 weeks. He issued orders based on maps from 2021. This absence created tactical paralysis. When drones appeared, junior soldiers didn't know whether to advance, retreat, or seek cover. When ammunition ran low, nobody had authority to withdraw. When wounded needed evacuation, no one coordinated with medical units. The result was predictable. Units disintegrated under pressure. Some fled at first contact. Others fought until ammunition expired, then surrendered. Some simply disappeared, walking away from positions at night, discarding equipment, becoming deserters or casualties in unmarked graves. Ukrainian forces recognized this collapse and exploited it systematically. Instead of massive offensives, they conducted continuous small-scale attacks designed to stress Russian logistics and morale. Drone strikes targeted ammunition dumps, forcing Russians to disperse supplies. Dispersed supplies meant longer resupply times. Longer resupply times meant units running out of ammunition under fire. Units without ammunition either surrendered or fled. Electronic warfare focused on jamming Russian communications during critical moments. A unit under attack couldn't call for artillery support. The wounded couldn't request evacuation. Commanders couldn't coordinate responses. Isolation bred panic. Psychological operations amplified the pressure. Loudspeakers broadcast surrender terms in Russian. Drones dropped leaflets showing safe passage corridors. Ukrainian forces published videos of prisoners receiving medical treatment and food. Contrast to Russian abandonment, the strategy paid off. Desertion in Russian units surged in 2025, in some cases doubling year on year. Hotlines to surrender were swamped with calls. Entire units were found to be combat ineffective on paper, their positions held only by silence, not soldiers. The September 29th helicopter kill crystallized a new reality. Warfare's economic equations had inverted. Throughout military history, defensive positions cost less than offensive operations. Now the gap has become absurd. Consider the lifetime costs. Training a helicopter pilot requires 500 flight hours minimum. At $15,000 per hour, that's $7.5 million before they're combat ready. The helicopter itself costs $18 million. Maintenance runs $5,000 per flight hour. A single combat mission burns $50,000 in fuel, ammunition, and wear. Total investment in one helicopter mission, approximately $25 million when factoring training and support. The drone wasn't a factory secret. It was the kind of modular FPV build an experienced hobbyist could assemble in a garage. The operator had only weeks of simulator time and a few field runs. The launch site was a hole covered with scrap metal. Total investment, including training, equipment, and warhead, under $3,000. That's an 8,333 to 1 cost ratio. Even if drones failed 99% of the time, they'd still be economically devastating. By October 2025, both sides were innovating rapidly. Ukrainian forces developed drone swarms, multiple FPV drones attacking simultaneously from different angles. Russian helicopters couldn't engage multiple tiny targets moving at 140 kilometers per hour from various directions. Russian forces attempted counter-drone systems, electronic jammers, shotgun-armed soldiers, even trained hawks. Nothing worked consistently. Jammers had limited range and drained batteries quickly. Shotgunners couldn't track fast-moving drones. The hawks refused to attack spinning propellers. The real innovation was organizational. Ukrainian forces created dedicated drone units at every level, from strategic reconnaissance to squad-level attack teams. They established drone schools teaching everything from basic piloting to explosive ordnance modification. They developed supply chains specifically for drone components, sourcing parts from civilian markets worldwide. The helicopter burning in that September field represented more than one aircraft's destruction. It symbolized the collapse of traditional military superiority. When a $2,000 drone can destroy an $18 million helicopter, when motorcycle assaults fail against prepared positions, when professional armies dissolve into testimonial videos, conventional warfare doctrine becomes obsolete. The Russian military's response, motorcycles, dispersion, bunker mentality, showed an institution unable to adapt. They kept fighting the last war while Ukraine invented the next one. Which defensive adaptation would you prioritize? Investing in electronic warfare systems that might jam 60% of drones? Training every soldier in counter-drone tactics that require constant vigilance? Or accepting losses and flooding the battlefield with cheap decoys to exhaust enemy drone supplies? Each choice means accepting vulnerability elsewhere. What's your calculation?